and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Shaun Tomson. Shaun is a world champion surfer, best-selling author, motivational keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and environmentalist. Shaun has also been admitted to the South African, Jewish, and American Surfing and Sports Halls of Fame and is called one of the top 10 greatest surfers of all time and one of the most influential surfers of the century by Surfer Magazine. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Shaun Tomson.
Thank you, Courtney. Thanks for having me. And also, I'd like to thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing, which is so closely aligned with the work that I do to spread a positive wave of hope and purpose around this broken world.
Shaun, it is an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. You are truly a superstar. My goodness. Like when I was researching for our conversation, I mean, you have made it to the top, obviously, like I just mentioned, of surfing, but then as a successful businessman, and just to be able to pick your brain, all the wisdom that you have with the life lessons. I cannot wait to share this podcast episode with all of our listeners. So why don't we go ahead and begin with an introduction and a background of yourself?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Durban, South Africa. It's a town of about 2 million people on the east coast of South Africa. I started competing at a young age. I won my first major professional event when I was 17 years old, and then went on to a long career. I competed professionally for about 16 years, and then retired, and then moved to the United States in the mid-90s. And worked for a wonderful company called Patagonia. I'd had my own company called Instinct, which is a very successful international apparel brand. We sold in 13 countries, and it was a wonderful, wonderful way to both compete and create a business at the same time, and also be able to mentor and sponsor other young surfers and help them realize their dreams. I sponsored a couple of surfers to win 3 world championships, and I was competing against them and paying their salaries at the same time. So that was quite a different thing. And then moved to the United States, worked for an amazing company called Patagonia. I think I'm the only employee ever hired at Patagonia that had never actually heard of the company. I was just introduced by a friend to the owner, and I thought it was a remarkable company, a very purpose-driven company, a company that was, I think, imbued with a sense of community and a sense that business is about doing the right thing. And if you do the right thing, it's going to be great for your business. Then my wife and I started another brand. We called it Solitude, which we ran for 7 years. It was the world's first sustainably focused surfing company. And it was wonderful to build that company up. And then ultimately we sold it to a publicly traded corporation called Oxford Apparel. And it was a wonderful journey to start something new and then sell it for the second time, like I'd done with Instinct. And then we had a terrible tragedy in our lives. My wife and I lost our beautiful 15-and-a-half-year-old son, Matthew, to a bad choice. He played a dangerous game that he heard about at school. And that sort of stopped my life for some time. And I wanted to reconsider like where I was going, why I was on this planet. You know, what could I do to really impact the world and impact the community with what I'd learned through my surfing and business life. So I wrote a number of books, and essentially they're all about values. My books and are about empowerment, how you can make and create a transformational change in your own life through your own words, and create a framework for living in a more meaningful and purposeful way. And then I started keynote speaking. And I now speak to the biggest and best corporations in the world, you know, companies like Google and Cisco and Gap and Disney and GM, very large corporations and smaller corporations too. And I have a cool program. It's called Double Shaka. Every time I do a paid event, I do a free one. I like to think that when you give, you get. Not in terms of economic principle, but you get this wonderful feeling in your soul. And I wrote a number of best-selling books, which I love doing. And now I share my message with schools and universities. Last month, I did 3 lectures at Harvard. You know, I work with the biggest and best universities, and my message is the same. No matter whether I'm speaking to a Fortune 500 company or I'm speaking to a small environmental group that's comprised of 20 people, I go, it's important to find inspiration from others, but you want to create transformation. You write your own words, you write your own code, and I've developed this little method that we can talk about. So that's been my journey. I love doing it. I still love getting out in the water and surfing, but I get equally as much satisfaction from giving people some stories and giving people a perspective. Never a prescription. Give people a perspective, show them a framework how they can really create more meaning and purpose and more commitment and power in their lives, and find the positive aspect of life, because there is so much negativity in the world today that all of us got the power to be a bright light. All of us have got the power to create a positive wave. I like to say that all of us got the power. Drop a stone, create a ripple, build a wave. All got the power. Drop a stone, create a ripple, build a wave.
Shaun, thank you so much for that introduction. And, you had certainly mentioned just like the power of storytelling and how that can inspire others just by sharing our story to then maybe transform their own life. Like they may be on perhaps a different journey than us, but they could seek inspiration from others' stories. And I love that you mentioned that, because that really is what this particular podcast is all about, like talking about the life lessons that we learn, the challenges that we go through in life, and different, kind of speed bumps that we never saw coming in our life. And how do we overcome them, overcoming those obstacles, overcoming those challenges. And so I would love for you to lay the foundation down, going back. When you first started surfing, if you could just enlighten us, like what inspired you, what influenced you to go in that particular direction of surfing?
So my father was a champion swimmer in his youth, one of South Africa's top swimmers, and his dream was to compete in the Olympic Games. My mom was a survivor from the island of Malta in the Second World War. It was a British strategic seaport where the British Navy had all their warships and battleships. So when war was declared, the Nazis and the Italians, the fascists, came over and they started bombing the island. It was in the Mediterranean, not far off the coast from Sicily. So she endured 3,600 air raids. It was the most heavily bombed place in the history of the world. For 4 years, she lived in underground shelters and had 2 direct hits on her home, and by miracle managed to survive and was eventually evacuated and ended up in Durban, where she met my father. So my father and mother were very powerful influences on my life. They were both incredibly positive people, very optimistic people, and they were both imbued with this feeling of helping others. Yes, they wanted their children to succeed, but they were very, very driven to help others. And, for instance, we were never allowed to fight at home. I had a brother and sister. We were not allowed to quarrel, ever. My mother said that's how wars get started. So, we came from a very, there was a lot of love in our household. Every single conversation with my mother and father ended with 2 words: God bless. That's the way they thought one should end a conversation with each other. God bless. It was always, if you walked in, you had to give them a kiss. You walked out, you had to give them a kiss, and it was God bless. So there was this feeling of love, and as a young person, I think it was very important. And then my family was a beach family because my dad had been a champion swimmer, and then my dad was training for the Olympics. He volunteered for the Second World War, came back, and then was training for the upcoming London Olympics. And he was out there surfing with a little wooden surfboard. And the Zambezi shark, which is the most feared predator in South Africa, the most dangerous shark in South Africa, perhaps in the world. I think more attacks have been have been attributed to the shark. And it hit him so hard, it lifted him in the air, and one bite shredded his arm from the shoulder all the way down the wrist. And one bite, that was the end of his swimming career. And by a miracle, he managed to survive, and but lived a life. There was no bitterness. There was no would have, should have, could have. There was no, well, I lost my chance, or life didn't turn out like a plan. Just from my dad, there was this incredible happiness, positivity, and honor. And, he taught me how to swim and surf 100 yards away from where he'd had that terrible attack. I mean, that's how much he still loved the ocean. From the first moment I stood up on a board, I loved it. And then, and my dad could see it, and, he made sure that anything I needed in connection with this great love, he made it happen. He bought me my first surfboard, and played an instrumental part in my developing career. In those days, there was no such thing as pro surfing. There was no path that you could follow. You could go to university and play your sport at university and then ultimately become a pro. There wasn't even pro surfing. In fact, my father started the world's first and longest running professional surfing event in South Africa. The first. He started it because he could see my love for surfing. We had surfers from all over the world ultimately come down to South Africa to compete, and eventually surfing, and I think my dad was really instrumental in it. Professional surfing has ultimately developed today into a multi-million-dollar sporting endeavor, and young guys and gals can make millions of dollars out of competing. And today we have a very established surfing industry that's worth billions of dollars. But I like to think that my dad saw the love in me and the love that I had for surfing, and then opened up a path for me and hundreds of thousands of other young people.
I just love that you pay tribute to your parents and how they really laid that foundation, like that solid upbringing, as you mentioned, just even in the household, but that feeling of love and of care. I think that is the most powerful thing, of being present in one's life. Like, I just even reflect on my childhood and my father always being present. And like you said, it was just such a loving environment that allowed a child to thrive. And as we move into, like I said, just the surfing and how your father heavily influenced you and paid attention to your love for surfing, you certainly flourished in this sport, to say the very least, Shaun. I would love for you to speak about that moment that you were crowned the 1977 world champion. What did that feel like, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, no, it was an amazing moment, and yes, it was the culmination of a dream. But what really drove me was just this passion I had for surfing, and this feeling of wanting to be better every single time I paddled out there, to push it to the max, ride the biggest waves, ride the deepest tube rides, create new maneuvers and innovate. So I like to think that, throughout and I wrote an article about it like a week ago. I read an article about it, about how I entitled it Practicing Passion. And I never thought of the time and the hours and hours I spent. And I spent more time in the water than anyone else during my professional career. I never thought of it as practice. It was my passion. And when you find that passion, it's not work, it's not practice. It's just this incredible enjoyment. And I think I really got that from both my mom and both my father. My father never said, you've got to get out there. Or when I was competing, you've got to get this wave, or you've got to get that wave. Or if I came in after a hard loss, he never would criticize me, ever. My father only gave me advice and encouragement. And I think it's a wonderful lesson for parental involvement in a sport, because you want to give encouragement, you want to give support, you want to give some direction, but you do not want to give prescription. And, my father really saw surfing like other sports. He loved other sports too, with honor and integrity. And he would say to me, hey, Shaun, hey, son. He would say, hey, son. When he was going to give me hey, son, he said, how about this? Winning is easy, but losing is hard. And when you win like a gentleman. And when you lose like a man. There was no crying allowed. There was no crying. There was no complaining about a judge's decision, because surfing is subjective. There's a panel of judges, and it's not like you're crossing the finish line first. It can be subjective. So there are decisions that, man, you don't agree with. When you come in, and what you're going to do, you're going to cry and shout and scream. So he would say, the judge's decision is inscribed in stone. Nothing that you do will ever change that decision. So you accept it, you move on. You accept it, you move on. So I never looked behind me and cried and got caught in that. Like a sportsman, you can get caught in that cycle of despair. You start spinning downwards, like would have, should have, could have. The judges ripped me off. So I never had that. So I was always moving forward. And in fact, you asked me about winning the world title for a while. Yeah, that was the culmination of 9 different events around the world. And then they had the last one. And yeah, it was a great feeling. It was a great feeling to win that title. But the very first pro contest that my dad had started, and I'd made the finals this one year. I was 17 years old. I was actually in the army doing my national service. And the commandant had let me off a couple of weeks to compete, but I was up on the podium. And at that time, this particular contest in South Africa was the biggest surfing event in the world. We used to get 30 to 40,000 people come down to watch it. It was like the biggest sporting event in the country. And I'm up on the podium with the other 5 finalists. There was 6 of us. And it wasn't instantaneous scoring. They wanted the drama. So all the finalists competed, and then they came in and they collated the judges' scores, and then they have this big tower on the beach where all the judges and the different officials sit. And my dad was in the tower, so my father knew the results. I'm standing on the podium, and then 40,000 people. It's a massive crowd, and there's all this excitement building. And I look up at my father, and I go like, "Dad, how about that?" And I look up at him, and he goes like this. I go, oh no, I'm like so bummed out, that this was my chance. And then they start announcing the results. 6, 5, 4. And in first place, Shaun Tomson. And I look up at my dad, and my dad is laughing his head off. And it was a great lesson for a young guy. Yeah, winning's important, but it's not everything. Your dad can even have a joke with his son about it. So it just always put winning for me in perspective. I never cried after a loss. I would lose. You walk up to your opponent, and you just shake. You just shake the hand. And I believe it's the same no matter what sport you're involved with. You want to get closure. You don't want to just get involved in that downward spiral of depression and unhappiness and bitterness. And you walk up to the guy or the gal, shake the hand and go, congratulations. Look them in the eye, shake with power. They know that you're there, and they know you're coming back. And it gives you the strength too, to like put it behind you and move forward.
That's so true. And I love that you mentioned, I want to pick this apart a little bit, but initially you speak about just like parental involvement in sport, and what you were talking about, I could certainly relate in the sport of gymnastics. Like growing up, my father literally, he would be there sometimes like at the end, maybe like 15, 30 minutes. He didn't know what some of these skills were that I was doing, like which event they were actually on. But I say that because I really did. I think it allows for the child, for the kid, obviously at that age, to really find that passion for the sport. And like you said, even if you lost, how your father would not be criticizing you, but if anything, providing like helpful, encouraging advice. And I think that is when you see that a child, that a kid could really thrive in a sport, is when they are able to, even, you mentioned it too before, but I love that you say this because I found the same thing in gymnastics. But even during those days when practices were so difficult. Maybe they were not the greatest practices, but you still had such a strong love for the sport that you didn't really view, quote, practices as practice. And so all of this, what you're saying, is certainly relatable. And Shaun, I would love for you to really, like, as you reflect back, early childhood, young adolescence, what were some life lessons that you learned during that time that you would actually pull forward with you into your professional career as a businessman?
So, with surfing is very different to any other sport on the planet. Every single sport is bound by a white line.
Mhm.
Every single sport has a finish line or goal line. The sea is just vast. So there are many lessons that surfing can teach you about life in the context of business as well. So my first book I wrote was called Surfer's Code, 12 Simple Lessons for Riding Through Life. And what happened was I was asked to join an environmental organization many, many years ago to become the first pro surfer member of this new environmental organization. It's called Surfrider Foundation. Today, it's the biggest surfing environmental organization in the world. We have millions of activist members around the world. Anyway, this guy, I was the number one surfer in the world at the time. He said to me, Shaun, we need an advertisement featuring you. We need to get a picture, and we need some words that describe the ethos of the organization, the character, the mission, the purpose. So I like to say that words have got great power. Words have got great power, but words have got great power for good and for evil. So I wrote 5 words. Do a good turn today. Super simple. Do a good turn today. Had a picture of me doing a turn, which is the fundamental maneuver in surfing, and it became sort of an iconic advertisement for Surfrider Foundation. These words have got great power. And I saw the impact of my 5 words on this organization. And then the same guy, about 20 years later, phoned me up. He said, Shaun, your adopted home break of Rincon, and one of the most famous surfing breaks in the world, having an environmental problem. He said, I'm going to be bringing a group of young people down to the beach, and I need you to inspire these people. So I knew, like, words have got great power. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the fundamental lessons that surfing has taught me about life in the form of 12 commitments, 12 promises. And I spent 15 minutes and I wrote them down on a sheet of paper, and then I printed up a little card. So I wrote these simple words like, I will always paddle back out. And, obviously that's about perseverance and it's about resilience. And I speak about a huge wipeout that I had, and I had to make the decision. What do you do? Do you paddle in or do you paddle out? And I say, every businessman, every sportsman, every human being on this planet is going to be faced at one time or another with that existential decision after a wipeout, because you're going to get wiped out. You're going to paddle in, you're going to paddle back out. And so for me, that is one of the most fundamental lessons that I talk about, perseverance, resilience, but underlying perseverance and resilience, like, where do you get the power to paddle back out? Where does it come from? Perseverance and resilience are like after the fact. That's a result, perseverance. But what underlies it? Hope, 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 hope. So hope is the power. Hope's the fire. Hope is the motor, the hope that you're going to get another wave. So surfing has taught me these amazing lessons. One of the other parts of the Surfer's Code is, and I think of my dad when I think of that one, is I'll never turn my back on the ocean. Now that's got 2 meanings, because the ocean is dangerous, and you go down to the sea, you don't want to turn your back, a wave will sweep you off your feet. It can be really dangerous, but also it's about passion. I'll never turn I think of my dad after this terrible shark attack that he never lost the love that he had for the ocean. And then I will know that there will always be another wave. This concept that you're a competitive gymnast, obviously had lots of success, that you lose, but there's going to be another chance. So accordingly, you don't have this like insane radical pressure that you're never going to get, never going to get another opportunity. So I wrote them down in the form of 12 commitments, and I printed up this card, and this card has now been read by millions of people around the world. And now I encourage people across the world to write their own code, to write their own 12 lines. I like to think, find your purpose, find your power, find your path. It's simple, 15-minute exercise, 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. So you talk about positivity. I talk about positivity. You write your code. Every word, every line is a story. Every line is about positivity and power. I will what? I will be kinder. I will do what I say I will do. I will be the light in the darkness. I get millions of people around the world. They write the code, and then we share it. When I do these big conferences or schools, kids write in classrooms, and then they all stand up and they read their 12 lines to each other. What does this do? It brings people together in this broken, divided, turbulent world. How can you bring people together? Write your code, and you know what you do? When people write their code, they share their values, and they're not here in the future. They're not looking at the future. They're looking right there at the present. I will commit to being kinder. I will be the light in the darkness. I will pray. People write amazing words, and then essentially they all part of this group that are creating this positive wave of hope and purpose around the world. Yes, you can see, Courtney, I'm a bit of a talkative guy, but I've looked into the soul of the United States. In February 20, when the world shut down, I started doing my work live stream, okay? And right at the beginning, I asked people a question. Text me a word that describes how you're feeling. I've done this with hundreds of thousands of people. Text me a word that describes how you're feeling. People text me a word, and I form a word cloud on my PowerPoint screen. So these have been the 4 words: stress, anxiety, depression, disconnection. I call it a sad mind state. Stress, anxiety, with the biggest companies in the world, with the most famous universities in the world, with prisons, with community groups, with religious groups, a lot of negativity out there. Those have been the 4 fundamental words. But what I have found in my experience, you tell 3 stories. Tell a story about the origin and development of this code. Tell a story about perseverance and resilience. Tell a story about courage and commitment. And I tell a story about being in the present, about emotional connectivity. And then everyone writes the code. 12 lines, every line begins with hello. 15 minutes, everyone. You can be the CEO and you can have 50,000 employees. You write your code as well. And then I ask people, I have observed the meaning and purpose of life by seeing people's codes, by seeing what people commit to. And while we all write different words, we only write 2 lines of code. Everyone writes the same 2 lines of code. Everyone writes the meaning of life in the form of 2 lines of code. Number 1, I will be better. Everyone writes, what does that mean? I will pray. I'll be kinder. I'll spend more time with my mom. I will do what I say I will do. I'll live a life of integrity. I'll be better. People want to be better today than they were yesterday. That's it. That's 1/2. It's only 1/2 of the meaning and purpose of life. The other half of the meaning and purpose of life, I will help others be better. I'll be a teacher. I'll be a volunteer. I'll be a mentor. What you do, what I do. We want to help other people be better because we have a calling, we have a mission, we have a purpose. And then people text me their favorite word about being better, and it comes across the screen. All these amazing words people write. And then I ask people, text me the word about helping others be better. And they come across, I'll be the light in the darkness. And people just write these, I'll be a better team member. I will spend more time with my son. People write. So everyone just gets imbued with this positivity. You know what it's called? It's called positive emotional contagion. It's a scientific positive, emotional, but there's also negative, positive. So now everyone is imbued with a sense. And then I go, okay, text me a word that you're taking home with you. Text me a word. No matter what the start can be 100% negative. They hear the stories, they write the code, they share the code. What are the two words? I've done this with hundreds of thousands of people. Hope and purpose. How about that? That's how quickly you can change mind state with stories and getting people to commit to a positive, purposeful, and meaningful future. It's amazing. That's my work. That's what I do. In a nutshell, it's super fun. I love it.
On your framework, the code method itself, as I was researching it and just hearing you talk about it, I mean, just the passion that you exude behind it and what you've actually experienced, my gosh, like just the profound impact that it has on people. You know, when I was preparing for this conversation, I wrote just one code. I'll get the other 11. I did. I wanted to share it with you. So, of course, just like you said, just focusing more so on positivity, but I will always find the positive in every situation that happens in life. And I do. I think, you know, as I mentioned, this is not, I always tell people too, like on this podcast, it's not about that, you know, when we talk about positivity, how, you know, oh, is life just so perfect, Courtney? Like, of course not. And I think that's the beauty that we are all relatable with one another when we really identify those challenging times and how we push through those challenging times and overcome the obstacles. And I think what I've learned in life is when you focus on the positivity in the morning, for me, waking up, doing a gratitude journal, just writing things that you're grateful for. I think it switches your mindset. Say you just wake up and it's not a good day already, like maybe you got a text message or a call or whatever, but it really changes your mindset. And so I just love to say that it's not about, you know, how life is just so perfect, but actually it's the fact of how do you appreciate the good times, but also during those bad times, how you could find like the silver lining. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes we're going through very difficult times in life, but if you could just search for that one like positive thought underneath it all. I think that's what's helped me or like drive me forward. And you mentioned two like such important words like hope and purpose. And Shaun, I know this is your life mission of helping people find their purpose. And I would just love to talk about your perspective on just the topic of purpose in one's life. Like, how did you find your purpose? And if somebody's maybe listening right now who is maybe struggling to find their purpose in life or their passion in life, what type of advice could you provide them?
So, you know, many people think that, you know, purpose is this sort of ethereal concept that's like hard to grasp, like what is it? So this is what I like to think purpose is, okay? So purpose is a committed intention. That's it. Purpose is a committed intention to realize aims, not goals, aims, broader, bigger. Okay? So it's a committed intention to realize aims that are meaningful to yourself and the broader community. So purpose, not just about self. It's like, what are you going to commit to? What are you going to really commit to that's meaningful to you and the broader community? That's sort of a definition that I like to use for purpose. So like, how are you going to find this? So the code is definitely one way to find it. Find your purpose, find your power, find your path. Simple. You can go to my website, ShaunTomson.com. It's free. I'm not trying to sell anything. Download a worksheet. And it's got 12 empty lines on it. And you spend 15 minutes. You can do it by yourself. It's wonderful to do with your family. It's wonderful to do with your business team. It's amazing to do with sports teams. Courtney, I have worked with so many sports teams that have been in last place. The whole team writes the code and they share their code. They've gone from last to first. Teams that have won the biggest sporting events in certain countries, massive pro teams, they have been last place. individual athletes, last place, they write the code, they go to third, then first, then first. It has incredible power because you've got to understand if you want to find your purpose, you're not going to find it from JFK or Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King. You're going to find it from your own words. Life is so busy these days. You've got this bloody crap phone, you've got AI. You just pick up a pen, download the worksheet, and you just write your lines. 15 minutes, 12 lines. It's super simple. And that is one way that it can really help people. Because, I've seen the negativity in the world. I've seen the power of stories and then of people writing the code, sharing the code. And I've seen those words that keep coming up: hope and purpose, hope and purpose. So I call it, there was that amazing book by Carol Dweck, Mindset. She talks about fixed mindset, growth mindset. For me, mind state, not mindset, because mindset denotes being like fixed. I like to think of mind state. You can create your own mind state. And for your listeners out there, okay, I've written 3 best-selling books. My books are cool. My first book was called Surface Code. My second book was called The Code, The Power of Our Will. My latest book is called The Surfer and the Sage. But there's a book that everyone should read, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a super little skinny book, but he talks about meaning, he talks about purpose, and he talks about attitude. So this book is by Viktor Frankl, who was a Viennese psychiatrist who was imprisoned at Auschwitz. And he talks about how our fundamental choice in life is our attitude. And he talks about it in an existential term, where in a prisoner of war camp, your attitude was one of that I will survive, hope, or you just give up and they just get in bed and die. And he talks about how meaning and purpose can be the fire. Even in the darkest, desperate, most dreadful times, how hope and purpose can be the fire that keeps you alive in the coldness of this dreadful place. So it's a really great book to read for people.
No, thank you for that. And, I just wanted to reflect on one point that you made when you were working with some of those top teams that literally went from last to first. What is something that you maybe saw as they were, writing down their separate codes and stuff, but coming together as a team? What do you think actually propelled them to find that success? Do you think it was literally their attitude? What are your thoughts on that you think really drove that success?
I think it's an individual awakening and an individual commitment, but I think it's a deep connectivity, a deep emotional connectivity with their team members. Because when you write your code, you're writing who you are from the inside out. It's a very vulnerable process. So I'll give you an example. I spoke at a prison, Santa Barbara County Jail, and I spoke to a group of about 50 prisoners, 50 inmates. Okay? Told the stories, everyone wrote the code, and then one at a time they got up and read the code. Now, when you read the code, it's let me tell you, this is an incredibly emotional experience. A lot of people cry when they read the codes to others. So there's really this wonderful sense of warmth, security, and safety. I've done this with hundreds of thousands of people. Only once has someone refused to do it. I say this is voluntary. You don't have to read your code. Only once has someone said no, I didn't. So now I've got all these inmates reading their codes. It comes to the hugest dude in the place. This guy's he's a man mountain. It's just massive, covered in tattoos, and just a super duper looking tough, gnarly guy. And he starts reading his code. He's about in the middle of the presentation, starts reading. And he comes to the line, I will forgive myself. and he starts crying. This huge guy is crying. And I'm looking around going, what are all these other tough guys going to do? They all come around him, they all start crying, and they all put their arms around each other. It was an amazing experience. So what does that show? It shows that vulnerability is contagious and powerful because it brings these tough guys together. It breaks down the barriers. So as you know, you're a successful competitor. And gymnastics, while you're in a team, it's still individual. You're not passing a ball to anybody. It's individual. Life is individual. Yes, teams are teams, but they're individuals. They're groupings of people. And how are you going to connect? How are you going to get people to connect? Well, they reveal who they are by write their code, they write their values, they write who they are. They're telling everyone, I'm telling you who I am and what I'm going to do. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to forgive myself. I'm going to be better, and I'm going to help others be better. It's amazing how this simple process can bring people together. And I have these amazing experiences with all sorts of people at all sorts of companies. And this, I like to think of the code, it's almost like a Swiss Army knife. It can do all these beautiful things. And like I gave it, surfing gave it to me, I give it to the world. The code, it's open source code. Anyone can use it in any way they want. It's there. It's there for, I'm a Jew and I'm a person of faith. And there's this concept in Judaism, they call it tikkun olam, repairing a broken world, helping repair it. And I like to think you're one person, I'm one person, but we like to make a difference. We like to help this world.
I was thinking about this, like, as you mentioned vulnerability. I think that that's number one. It's such a powerful word, but I feel just the ability to connect with others by spoke about storytelling, but I think I could totally see, especially in sport. And so I think that there's a power of coming together, of feeling connected, of sharing those vulnerable moments. And how do we move forward? So whether it's sport, whether it's life or career, I think it's all translatable. And I firmly believe, just after researching your code, how that could translate, like I said, just across different aspects of life, and how powerful it could be in one's life. And so, Shaun, we had spoke about it just even at the beginning. You had mentioned it, but you are the president and the founder of Instinct. And this was a company that you actually, from my understanding, you founded in 1980, but here you are relaunching it in last year of 24. So tell us all about it. I could tell you're just so passionate about it. So please share with the listeners what it's all about.
I'm very, very excited about relaunching my brand. I started it when I was 22 years old in South Africa, and we grew into a nice sized company, an international brand, 13 countries. Like I say, I sponsored 2 surfers to become world champions 3 times. In fact, the one young surfer I sponsored, I led the professional tour the whole year in 1985. And then right at the end, he beat me. So it was like a bittersweet moment. Here's a guy I'm sponsoring and helping and mentoring. He beats me for the world title, and he ended up 1 and I ended up 2. But it was great to be an entrepreneur. And then after I retired from pro surfing, I sold the company. And then recently, my wife Carla and I, we've been married for 38 years. We bought it back and we relaunched it in March. In the United States. So it's wonderful. We're in about 120 shops around the country. And, the brand is absolutely aligned with my movement to create a positive wave of hope and purpose around the world. So what I do is I align business with my movement. So a portion of every sales goes towards this foundation that my wife and I are going to be starting in the next few months, called the Think Twice Foundation, to empower young people to make positive choices. So we connecting profit and purpose together in a very sort of symbiotic way, and it's wonderful to to use the company to spread this positivity, this positive wave around the world, because the world really needs positive. There is so much hatred around the world. There's so much. There was a big Gallup poll last year, and they interviewed 1.2 million team members, 1,300 companies, and they said 79% of employees around the world are disengaged. That means they're unenthusiastic about the work, unenthusiastic about their fellow team members, unenthusiastic about their place of work. And it was just such a startling figure. And, I like to think that, how can you imbue people with a sense of passion and purpose? How can you help people find, what they really want to do? Is you've got one life, you know what I mean? One life. Maybe be grateful for what you got. Sometimes I'll do an event for like an elite university, and I'll ask them, text me a word that describes how you're feeling, and like all the words are negative. And, I'm going like, where's gratitude? Because you most probably here because you've got a scholarship. Here you are at this finest university, and you're just unhappy. Like, how's that possible? Here you are, like, learning from all these esteemed minds. Like, get a grip. And how are you going to get a grip? Listen to some stories from someone who's passionate about what they do. Yeah, that can help. The emotional contagion can maybe help you start catching the wave. And then write your code and share your code. And wow, suddenly your mind state has changed. And, one of the other things I've also seen is, and you're a gnarly sportsman, you're a hardcore sports person. Sportsmen have got inordinate amounts of influence on young people. The sportsmen have an incredible responsibility. Sports people got a big responsibility to nurture that relationship and be positive, because kids going to watch what you do. Sportsmen out there being anti-Semitic, or sportsmen out there being racist, or sportsmen out there not showing honor and integrity on the field, man, it's going to reflect onto young people. So you've got that big responsibility, and I've always tried to do the right thing for my sport. Surfing when I started had a very negative, maybe very negative perception, and myself, and there was a group of us guys, about 6 guys from Australia and South Africa. We really tried to change the perception, and I think we did, not because it was phony, but because that's what we believed. That was core values for us. We believed what we were doing as good as we were as good as anyone. We were as good as the tennis players, the golfers, the gymnasts, and yeah, we got inspired by other sports. I mean, you took gymnastics. Olga Korbut, man, Nadia Comaneci blew our minds because it was maybe one of the closest things to what we did, in that terms of kind of mind-body relationship in kind of the as gymnasts, you're in the vastness of the air, we're in the vastness of the water. There's definitely a connectivity there. So, sportsmen have got a big responsibility. And when I speak to sports teams, I tell them, hey man, you guys and girls, kids are going to be looking up to you, and you can impact a life. You can impact a life. Kid comes up to you for your autograph. Let me tell you, you say no or you rude, they will remember that forever. Ever. I mean, I have so many people. Hey, Shaun, I came up to you in like 40 years ago when I was a kid, and it was so inspiring. You wrote something. So I can see what positivity can do and what negativity too can break a heart. Break a heart.
It's so true. And when I think of positivity in general, like I talk about it as a choice. Like every morning we make many decisions throughout our day. We have many choices to choose from, but I do think positivity is definitely something that we could choose every single morning when we roll out of bed. You could choose to view, like I said, we spoke about it before, but like having that viewpoint, that perspective of gratitude, being grateful for what's around you. And I think something that's really interesting, like perhaps even with the influence of social media and the constant, social comparison, I think that can, in fact, weigh heavily on especially younger ages. And so I think what's interesting, though, just through my own experience, my personal experience, but having social media accounts that are like specifically purpose driven, they're really just related to my business. But when you are able to serve others, there's a sense of like deep fulfillment that you get that's kind of unexplainable. I don't know how to explain it, but people will ask me even like, your sense of happiness or your energy, where does it come from? But there is something to be said about lifting others up and allowing others to be heard, to be recognized. And when you start pointing outward, like not so much all about me, there is something that provides you that sense of like inner, it's not an inner peace, but it's like a fulfillment of sorts that you don't just naturally get through more like materialistic things. And so I think when we talk about positivity in sport, and I love how you mention how sport, especially those athletes at various levels, whether it's collegiate, even high school, as early as high school, but how you could influence those around you and have such a profound positive impact. So what you say, how you act, like you said, providing somebody an autograph, if you're at the top of your game with something and taking the time to do that, it could make such a world of a difference and it could be such a positive impact. So I love how you say that, Shaun. And I would love to hear, this is kind of a transition. But you are also an international keynote speaker, and you have spoke to corporations, my goodness, Google, Disney, Cisco, Gap, General Motors. If you could just share your journey with us.
Yeah, it's incredibly satisfying. And, when I ask people right at the beginning, text me a word that describes how you're feeling, and it might be 100 people, it might be 500 people, it might be 2,000 people. I mean, big audiences. And you see these words come up and you go, wow, that someone is sitting there and they're really struggling. They're really struggling. Maybe they, like me, they've lost a child, or maybe they've had a bad health diagnosis, or they've lost a mom. And then I see the words and I go, wow. And you've got this like responsibility. And also now I've come to realize I have a talent for helping, and I love it. I love it. And it's not from a egotistical point of view. Like, my stories are genuine. There's no BS. I don't tell Bill Gates' story or Elon Musk's story, I tell my story. Mm-hmm. And I think people appreciate when you are authentic and you're vulnerable as well. My stories are vulnerable, man. Sometimes I'll be crying telling my stories, and so will everyone else in the audience. And it's not there to jerk someone's emotions around. It's I want to tell people the truth. I want to tell people the hard stuff, but I want to give people the hope and purpose as well. And it's beautiful when I see that transition from negative mind state, tell some stories, beautiful stories about surfing. And 99.99% of my audience are not surfers. But there's something about the sea that is just fascinating to people because it's so vast and it's so turbulent and it's volatile and it's unknown and there's risks. So my stories, they're dramatic and fun. But I like to think that my stories, and I think for all storytellers, they're two things. They're both a window and they're both a mirror. So like I tell my stories, and yes, they might be outside of the commonality of the person's experience, but it's like a mirror into their soul. They're hearing the story and they're kind of seeing who they are and reevaluating who they are. And also my story is like a window into perhaps maybe something new for them, because this concept of paddling out and catching a wave, and then you the big wipeout, and then you paddle out and you catch another one. It's about sort of revival, re-energy, and then recoding, when they write the code. It's pretty cool. And it's incredibly satisfying for me. And, I lost my beautiful boy, my wife and I. We went through some terrible times, but the sun will rise again. Tomorrow morning, there'll be a beautiful sunrise, and there'll be, there's hope, always hope for that new day. And when you give something to others, whatever you might do, you might volunteer at a food bank, or you might join an environmental group, or you might be a teacher or a volunteer. You know who the real recipient is? It's like you were chatting about it. It's not the person who's receiving what you're giving, but it's you, because it gives you that amazing spiritual fulfillment. It gives you that amazing warmth, and it gives you that feeling that, man, I'm doing something. I'm doing something, not for me, but I'm doing something for the world. And it's a great feeling, that. And it's not an egotistical feeling. It has nothing to do with ego. It's sort of the satisfaction that you dropping the stone, creating that ripple, and you're building that wave. And I love to connect with like-minded people like you. People think positivity, it's kumbaya. It's not. Let me tell you, there's a whole new field that was developed only 30 years ago, positive psychology. I met the founder, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who developed the theory of flow. Did 2 presentations with him. He passed away. But this whole concept of positive psychology, what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and Martin Seligman created, the study of how you can flourish in life, how life can be better, how psychology is not about study of the malady. It's a study of the best aspects of human existence, and how to find that meaning and how to find that purpose. And yes, there's so many practitioners with so many different interventions. I mean, I suppose, that's what they call my intervention. I have one of thousands of interventions. Mine's super simple, super quick, super fun. And I encourage your listeners, just go to my website, ShaunTomson.com, download the worksheet, write your code, share your code, and together we can be part of this movement that you're part of. All of us, we're creating this wave of positivity around the world, and the science is there now behind it. The science is there that you can live a dismal, dark life, or you can live a positive, hopeful, purposeful life. Your choice. Like Viktor Frankl said, our attitudes, fundamental choice in life, positive or negative. That's the choice, the existential choice.
So true. Shaun, it has been an absolute honor to have you on this podcast episode, and just to take in like all of your wisdom that you've shared. I want to dive more into this, the code method itself. Congratulations. You are 3 books now, best-selling author, and what you have really done with making a positive impact on, you mentioned, from your sports background and a successful businessman, but to be able to translate that into speaking engagements that have such a profound impact on these business women and men, I think is so powerful. How sport is powerful, how it could really change one's perspective on life. That's why I love to talk about like life lessons, sport experiences, and career experiences. And so, Shaun, if you would please be so kind to provide our audience maybe a positive message or a positive quote for our whole community.
So, like I said, I'll show you this here. So I give these armbands out. So on the one side, it says service code. On the other side, it says I will equals power.
Oh, yes.
But then on the inside, it's very faint on the inside, which is, I think, a quote that maybe is a great quote for the society in which we live today. And that is, I will always paddle back out. I will always paddle back out. So yes, it's about perseverance, and yes, it's about resilience, and yes, it's about courage, and yes, it's about commitment. But underlying it, it's about hope. And it's orange, and that's the color of hope. That's the color of the sunrise.
Shaun, thank you so much. That is so positive. This whole podcast episode has been so uplifting. And I cannot wait to share this with listeners. So thank you so much for coming on. And I wish you all the best here moving into 2026.
Well, I wish you the best too, Courtney. It's been a great pleasure. And thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing. Really, really wonderful.
Thank you so much.